Hello and welcome to the Music Survival Guide, the independent musician's guide on how to survive the music industry. My name is Phil, a mixing and mastering engineer. Hope you're doing wonderfully well out there. We are into October and it's just that kind of mad kind of time of year. I always think September to Christmas is like the longest part of the year. It just seems to drag on forever and gets exhausting. At least it does to me. But anyway, let's talk about more positive things. Mixing. Mixing is, as you may be able to understand, one of my favourite things. I think it's my favourite part of the process, but that's just because I do it so much and I engage with it so much. Why mix yourself? That's what I want to talk about this week. Why would you consider doing that? What's the advantages of doing that? What's the negatives of doing that? Disadvantages of doing that? And how would you go about it? Why would you go about it? Blah, 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 blah. I'm going to stop talking about what I'm talking about and actually talk about it. A lot of words that don't mean a lot. So, positives. Why would you mix yourself? Well, the big positive, the obvious answer, is it is cheaper. You know, getting a mix engineer is not cheap generally. If you want someone good, they're not cheap. And that, you know, is a bit of a problem. It can or not always be affordable, and that's a shame. And you may want to do that for that reason. That's a very big reason. And I can totally understand the reason. The other reason, and there's not really much more to say about that, so I'm not really talk about that much more. The other reason why you might want to mix yourself, I guess, is creative control. If you're there like, I want to make sure that this sounds exactly the way that I want to, and I want to have my hands on all parts of the process. You know, if you're confident in what you're doing, that is a completely understandable approach. Totally understand why you might want to kind of hold on to control of it, make sure that no one outside of your circle hears it. Totally get that. And finally, my third reason, I guess, is that you might just enjoy it. You might be like me. You might be a mad person who thinks this is great fun. I really enjoy the process of collating this set of tracks and making it sound organised. That sounds horrible. Making it sound the way that it should sound and kind of pushing in the right direction. Now, that's all really good, but I guess I want to maybe come back on some of those questions for you. You know, the affordability thing, totally get it. Totally get it. It's not a cheap world at the moment. Everything seems to be, at least in the UK, everything's getting more and more expensive and it's getting more and more difficult to do things, to be honest with you. So totally get it. Here is a counter thought for you. If you are trying to, say, do an EP, have you considered doing, say, a single with said mixing engineer? That is obviously not going to cost as much because you're not asking them to do as much work, and it's a good compromise. Maybe you need to spend more time saving up for said mixing, and that will help you to get the end product that you know that you want to get and that you know you will get with that person. Maybe if you definitely haven't got any money, you need to speak to people that you trust outside of the band to listen to it and give you thoughts. See, the thing is, if you mix it yourself, here's a negative. If you mix it yourself, the chance is that it won't sound quite the way you want. Why? Because you've heard it so much. You've heard it from beginning to end. And you can get so used to it. You can get so used to it sounding a certain way that hearing it another way doesn't necessarily work for you. So, for example, if you've recorded a guitar tone a particular kind of way throughout the entire EP or whatever it may be, and you think that sounds great to me, that sounds perfect, why would you change it? And then you hire a mixing engineer, for example, they listen to it and they go, well, it just needs to be a bit brighter, or it needs to be, say, have a bit more low end, for example, whatever it may be, to work in the track and to work in the style of music that this band is working towards. And you may kind of just be a bit, I guess, sonically deaf to that because you're so used to it, because that's just the way it sounds. Now, the way out of that, if you really haven't got any budget to do it, is to have someone you trust to kind of listen to it and give you some objective thoughts. But then again, I genuinely think, I know I'm a mixing engineer, I genuinely think hiring a mixing engineer is going to put your music in so much better stead. The thing a mixing engineer can bring to the table is they have experience of working on music, lots of different styles and genres usually, and types of music, and you have experience generally of working on your own music and no other music. That's the problem behind it. A mixing engineer or a producer who also mixes spends all their time focusing on getting the best sounds out of the music that they're presented with, and they will listen to your music and then think in the same way, how can I get the best out of this music? Really good mixing engineers will listen to a song and they will draw out the emotion from it. That's the thing a lot of people miss. You're not just trying to get the sounds kind of in order and to work well, you're trying to convey the emotion of the song, and ideally every instrument, every part will build towards that emotion. So say it's a metal song, I don't know, it's an angry metal song, let's just go that way, the lyrics are angry. how can you as a mixing engineer, or how can I say as a mixing engineer, make that everything in this track work together to sound as aggressive as possible? Now that doesn't mean that you need to say apply distortion to everything, because certain things need to sit back in the mix and be less obvious, but it's that kind of balance that a mixing engineer can bring to it to really help convey and bring out the emotion. A good mixing engineer will work with you, not against you on your music. I have heard horror stories, I'm not going to say who, but I've heard horror stories from bands who've had terrible experiences with mixing engineers and producers and the like, who just don't feel like they've been listened to. And that's a real problem. You know, at the end of the day, this is my approach. This is what I tell bands who I work with. It's your music, not mine. At the end of the day, it's your name on it, not mine. So you need to be happy with it. As long as you as a band are happy with it, the mixing engineer is doing a good job. The thing about it is, when you're paying for a mixing engineer, you're not necessarily just paying for their time to work on your music, although you are. You're also paying for their expertise, their kind of backlog of information. You know how you can go on YouTube and there's countless tips and tricks and ideas about mixing and ideas and approaches that you can take. But a mixing engineer generally has spent time thinking about all that, working all that through, so that when they're sitting down with your music, they're not spending time on YouTube kind of going, oh, maybe I should do this, maybe I should do that, how can I do that? That kind of thing. They're going, right, I know exactly what I need to do to make this music sound the way I think it should sound. Of course, good mixing engineers will also then go around and offer you revisions, and then you can perfect it and you can make sure it works well for you. It's not just that person's vision of the music. So if you're thinking about a mixing engineer, how do you go about working out who you should work with? How does that even work? Well, do you like their output? Have you listened to other things that they have worked on? Do you like it? Yes or no? You know, it might be different genres from what you do, and that's fair enough, but generally, do you like their approach? Have you spoken to other bands that person has worked with? Say they've got reviews on his website, his or her website, for example, or testimonials on their social media, or you just know who they've worked with and you've spoken to them. Find out what that person is like to work with, because at the end of the day, if they are a dick, then it won't matter how good or bad the music is, it's going to leave a bit of a bitter taste in your mouth. So have a think carefully about that. Now, don't get me wrong, mixing is great fun. Mixing is really fun. This is not me saying that you shouldn't work on your music in this way. This is me saying that you should consider why you are not hiring a mixing engineer, why you are mixing yourself instead of hiring someone in to do it. Now, again, don't get me wrong. You may want to hold all your cards to yourself, as it were. You may really, really enjoy the process. Totally get that. But it might not be the best thing for your music. And that's just something to consider, something to think about. So that's all I've really got to say for this mini episode. So thank you for listening to another episode of the Music Survival Guide. If you liked it, please rate and review the podcast wherever you listen. It all helps the algorithm, of course. Please also share it with any friends and bandmates if you thought it was useful. Any interesting information, tidbits, ideas, thoughts, that kind of thing. Finally, if you're thinking about recording or mixing, you want to talk about it, feel free to reach out to me via the links in the podcast description below. Somewhere I'm pointing down, even though you can't see me, somewhere below. And I will see you next time.